The great chamber of Nexus Prime stretched beyond what most minds could grasp, and in its center stood Speaker Vorthak, with his 4 arms raised high above his massive head, while hundreds of different alien species watched from their floating platforms that circled the central stage like moons around a planet. Vorthak's voice boomed through the chamber without any need for technology because his people had evolved to speak across vast distances, and today his words carried news that would shake the foundation of everything the Galactic Council had built over 50,000 years. "Council members, we face something that should not exist," Vorthak said, and his words made the chamber fall silent, except for the soft humming of the life support systems that kept so many different species alive in one space. 6 months ago, our scouts discovered a species that breaks every rule we know about how civilizations develop. On the massive screens that surrounded the chamber, images began to appear, showing a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star in what most council members considered the Outer Rim territories, where nothing important ever happened. This world calls itself Earth, and its dominant species calls themselves humans, Vorthak continued, while the images showed cities of glass and metal covering large portions of the planet's surface. According to our initial scans, they achieved nuclear fusion only 87 years ago, yet they have not destroyed themselves. A ripple of confusion moved through the assembled delegates because every species in the council knew the statistics, and no civilization survived more than 50 years after splitting the atom without proper guidance. From more advanced species, the screens changed to show recordings from 6 months earlier when Captain Daeho Kim of the human vessel New Horizon had first encountered the Zelthari Empire patrol ships near the edge of what humans called their solar system. Daeho appeared on screen as a man of average height with dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything around him without showing fear, even when faced with ships that could have destroyed his vessel with a single weapon. Pulse. The Zelthari followed standard first contact protocol, Vorthak explained while the footage showed the massive Zelthari ships surrounding the much smaller human vessel. They issued the compliance test expecting either immediate surrender or the destruction of the primitive craft. But instead of surrender or destruction, the impossible happened. The humans had somehow managed to communicate with the Zelthari using a combination of mathematics and basic physics that impressed even the Council's best linguists, and when the Zelthari captain demanded they submit to Imperial authority, Daeho had simply asked if the Zelthari needed help with anything. "Captain, this is Sujin Park, our medical officer," Daeho had said in the recording, while introducing a woman with short black hair and intelligent eyes who carried what appeared to be primitive medical equipment. "She noticed that your crew members show signs of cellular degradation that might be treatable." The Zelthari captain had laughed at first because what could a primitive species possibly know about advanced alien biology? But Sujin had somehow identified symptoms of the Red Death Plague that had been killing Zelthari colonists for over 300 years within days. The human medical team had not only identified the cause of the plague, but had worked with Zelthari scientists to develop a cure using a combination of human medical knowledge and Zelthari technology that neither species could have achieved alone. "The implications are disturbing," Vorthak said, while new images showed human and Zelthari scientists working side by side in laboratories. Not only did they survive first contact with a superior military force, but they turned a potential conquest into a partnership. Council member Thexnar of the Void Swimmers raised one of her tentacles to signal a question, and Vorthak acknowledged her with a nod. "Speaker, Vorthak, did the humans attempt to claim superior status after providing aid to the Zelthari, as most species would do?" "That is perhaps the most troubling aspect," Vorthak replied, while the screens showed Daeho and the Zelthari captain signing some kind of agreement. When offered vassal status under Zelthari protection, The humans declined and instead proposed what they called an equal partnership agreement. The chamber erupted in confused chatter because no species in recorded galactic history had ever refused vassal status when offered protection by a more advanced civilization. Furthermore, Vorthak continued, and his voice cut through the noise, our intelligence reports indicate that humans have made similar agreements with 12 other species in just 6 months using a pattern we do not understand. The screens now showed Wan-Sik Lee, a human engineering specialist who had somehow learned to operate 3 different types of alien technology and had combined them into new designs that worked better than the original systems human Wan-Sik Lee created. This hybrid power system, by studying Zelthari energy cores, Vixnari crystal technology, and Terran mechanical engineering. Vorthak explained, while technical diagrams appeared on screen, the result produces 30% more energy while using fewer resources. Council member Grazathok of the Stone Eaters slammed his massive fist against his platform, making a sound like thunder. This is impossible because different technological systems cannot be combined without centuries of careful integration testing. Yet humans accomplish in weeks what our best engineers require decades to achieve. Vorthak replied, they seem to possess an intuitive understanding of how different systems can work together. The footage changed again to show more recent events where human ships that looked like no vessel anyone had ever seen before moved through space using propulsion systems that appeared to violate several known laws of physics. 3 weeks ago, human vessels appeared in the Karathi system and offered to help resolve a territorial dispute that has lasted for 400 years, Vorthak said, while the screens showed human diplomats meeting with various alien leaders. They succeeded in 2 days. How, asked Council Member Veltar, of the crystal mines, by asking questions no one had thought to ask and listening to answers no one had thought to give, Vorthak replied, they discovered that the entire conflict was based on a translation error from centuries ago. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in, because territorial disputes were supposed to be permanent features of galactic politics that helped maintain the balance of power between different regions. Our xenosociology experts have run every analysis possible. Vorthak continued, according to all established models, humans should have destroyed themselves within 50 years of developing nuclear weapons or been conquered by the first advanced species they encountered. Instead, they continue to spread through our territory, making friends and solving problems that we believed were unsolvable, Vorthak said, while images showed human children playing with alien younglings on various colony worlds. They offer knowledge, freely expect nothing. In return, accept friendship, and somehow make every species they encounter stronger. Council member Zixfon of the Deep Void species that rarely spoke in council sessions raised his crystalline head. What do our strategic analysts recommend, Vorthak's expression grew dark. Our analysts are divided, but the majority report concludes that humans represent either the greatest opportunity or the greatest threat to galactic stability in 50,000 years. They recommend immediate intervention before human influence spreads beyond our ability to control, Vorthak said, while the screens showed star maps with human influence spreading like ripples through council space. Some suggest integration under careful supervision, while others recommend complete quarantine. And a small faction suggests something that has never been attempted in council history. Vorthak paused and looked around the chamber. They suggest we learn from the humans instead of trying to control them. The chamber erupted, again because the idea of the Galactic Council learning from a primitive species was almost unthinkable. We will vote in 7 days, Vorthak announced over the noise. Until then, humans remain under special observation while we decide how to handle this unprecedented situation. As the council session ended and delegates returned to their ships to consult with their home governments, none of them noticed the small human observation post hidden in the asteroid field just outside Nexus Prime, where Dae-Ho Kim and his crew watched everything and prepared for whatever decision the council would make. Council researcher Talnith stared at the holographic display floating above her desk and rubbed her temples with all four of her delicate fingers while trying to make sense of data that seemed to defy every law of xenosociology that had been established over 50 millennia of galactic civilization. The equations dancing in the air before her told an impossible story about a species that should have been extinct for decades, but instead thrived in ways that made her question everything. She thought she knew about how intelligent life developed across the galaxy, computer-run probability analysis on human civilization survival using standard xenosocial development models, she said to the artificial intelligence that had been helping. Her research for the past 3 weeks, analysis complete. The computer replied in its neutral voice. Probability of human civilization surviving 87 years post-nuclear development given observed aggression levels, territorial disputes, and technological advancement rate is 0.03%. Talnith leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling of her research laboratory, while trying to understand how a species with a 99.97% chance of self-destruction had not only survived but had begun influencing other civilizations in ways that seemed to benefit everyone involved. Her research had revealed that humans possessed every trait that typically led to rapid extinction, including divided tribal groups, competing resource acquisition systems, weapons technology that could destroy their entire planet, and most dangerous of all, a tendency to seek out conflict rather than avoid it. Yet here they are, she whispered to herself, while pulling up footage of human ambassador HFY Choi arriving at Nexus Prime aboard a vessel that should not have been able to exist. The ship that carried the human diplomatic mission looked like something from a fever dream with hull plating that appeared to be Zelthari crystal matrices wrapped around what looked like Vorthon energy conduits connected to propulsion systems that resembled no known technology, while somehow working in perfect harmony. Talnith had studied every known spacefaring species and understood that combining different technological systems was virtually impossible because each civilization developed their science based on their unique biology, environmental conditions, and thought patterns. Zelthari technology worked because Zelthari minds thought in crystalline patterns that matched their silicon-based neural networks, while Vorthon systems functioned through energy manipulation that reflected their plasma-based physiology. Computer. How many different technological systems appear to be integrated in the human diplomatic vessel? Talnith asked while highlighting various components visible in the detailed scans. Analysis indicates integration of at least 6 distinct technological paradigms, including Zelthari crystalline matrices, Vorthon energy systems, Korathi, mechanical interfaces, Veltari organic computing elements, Thexnari quantum field generators, and an unknown base technology that appears to be human in origin. Talnith felt her primary heart skip a beat because integrating even 2 alien technologies typically required decades of careful study and testing, while attempting to combine 6 different systems should have resulted in catastrophic system failures or complete vessel destruction. Computer. What is the probability that such integration could be achieved without centuries of development time? Probability approaches 0% given known limitations of cross-species technological compatibility, but the impossible ship had not only arrived safely at Nexus Prime, but had done so faster than most Council vessels could have made the same journey while broadcasting friendly greetings in 47 different languages, including several that had been considered dead for thousands of years. Talnith activated the communication logs from the human diplomatic mission and watched as Ambassador HFY Choi stepped off her impossible ship with a smile that seemed to light up the docking bay. HFY appeared to be a woman in her middle years with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes, who carried herself with quiet confidence and spoke to everyone she met as if they were old friends she was happy to see again. Greetings, Council members. HFY had said during her first diplomatic meeting, We bring friendship and hope for cooperation between our peoples. The standard diplomatic protocol required new species to demonstrate their technological capabilities, military strength, and territorial claims before being considered for council membership. But humans seemed completely uninterested in following any established procedures. Instead of presenting military force projections or territorial demands, HFY had simply asked if there was anything humanity could do to help solve problems that council members were facing. We understand that the Zarian cluster has been experiencing difficulties with their atmospheric processors, HFY had said while consulting notes that appeared to be handwritten on primitive paper. Our engineer Junho Nam believes he might be able to suggest some improvements. Junho Nam had turned out to be a former military strategist who had somehow retrained himself as a diplomatic engineer and had spent his first week at Nexus Prime visiting different species representatives to learn about their technological challenges. The fascinating thing about atmospheric processing, Junho had explained to a group of skeptical Zarian engineers, is that every species approaches the problem differently based on their own atmospheric needs, but the underlying principles remain the same. Within days, Junho had identified solutions to problems that had been stumping Zarian engineers for years. By combining approaches that different species had developed independently and finding ways to make them work together. Computer analyze human diplomatic mission personnel files for unusual characteristics, Talnith requested while reviewing security. Footage of the human team moving through Nexus Prime. Analysis complete. The computer replied, human diplomatic team displays several anomalous traits including rapid language acquisition, accelerated technological integration ability, and unprecedented cross-species social adaptation. The security footage showed Boram Shin, a human communications specialist who had somehow learned to speak fluent Veltari in 3 days, despite the fact that Veltari communication involved complex harmonic frequencies that most species required months to master. How did human Boram Shin achieve functional Veltari language skills in 72 hours when average species require 120 days minimum? Talnith asked. Analysis of vocal pattern progression suggests an intuitive understanding of harmonic communication principles that appears to be instinctive rather than learned. Talnith pulled up more footage showing Boram having conversations with dozens of different species using their native languages and somehow managing to make each interaction feel natural and comfortable. They adapt, Talnith whispered while watching humans integrate seamlessly into social groups that had taken other species centuries to navigate. They learn and they adapt faster than should be possible. Her research revealed that humans had established what they called friendship treaties with 12 different species in just 6 months. But these were unlike any diplomatic agreements in Council history. Traditional treaties involved careful negotiations over territorial boundaries, resource allocation, military cooperation agreements, and technological exchange limitations that could take decades to finalize. Human friendship treaties were simple documents that essentially said both species agreed to help each other when possible, share knowledge freely, and work together to solve mutual problems. Computer. What is the strategic value of human friendship treaty model compared to standard council diplomatic frameworks? Analysis indicates human treaty model creates exponential benefit increases for all parties, while traditional council treaties create zero-sum resource allocation patterns. Talnith stared at the analysis results because zero-sum thinking had been the foundation of galactic politics for 50,000 years, with the understanding that one species gaining advantage meant others losing position. But humans seem to create situations where everyone benefits, she said while reviewing economic data from systems where humans had established partnerships. The numbers were undeniable, and every species that had signed friendship treaties with humans showed measurable improvements in technological development, resource efficiency, and social stability. Computer compile final assessment of human species classification for council review. Talneth spent the next several hours preparing her report, but as she worked, she began to realize that her findings would not be welcomed by many council members. Her data showed that humans represented something that had never been encountered before in galactic history because they appeared to be a species that made other species better simply by interacting with them. Final assessment. Complete, she said to her recording device. Human species displays unprecedented characteristics that do not conform to any known patterns of civilizational development. They demonstrate rapid technological integration abilities, accelerated learning, capabilities, and most significantly, an apparent instinctive drive toward mutually beneficial cooperation that produces exponential advantages for all participants. Recommendation. Talneth paused because she knew her next words would change everything. Human species may represent an evolutionary leap in consciousness that renders current galactic political and social structures obsolete. The Emergency Council session convened in a chamber that had been sealed from all external monitoring because what Speaker Vorthak was about to propose would violate several dozen interstellar laws and potentially start the First Galactic War. In 20,000 years, Council members, we have received researcher Talneth's assessment of the human situation, Vorthak announced while his four arms gestured toward the sealed entrance, where heavily armed guards ensured no information would leave the room. Her conclusions are unacceptable. Around the circular chamber, representatives from the Council's most powerful species listened with growing alarm as Vorthak outlined Talneth's findings about humanity's disruptive influence on established galactic civilization. If humans continue spreading their cooperative philosophy, we face the complete breakdown of the political systems that have maintained galactic stability for 50 millennia. Vorthak continued while holographic. Displays showed human influence spreading like a virus through Council space. Council member Thexna raised her tentacles in a gesture of concern. Speaker, what do you propose we do about this threat? We will create a test that demonstrates human limitations and proves they are not the miraculous species that Talneth's report suggests, Vorthak replied with satisfaction. We will orchestrate a crisis that even humans cannot resolve. The plan that Vorthak outlined was elegant in its cruelty, because it would use existing tensions between three species that had been at war for centuries to create a situation where any intervention would make things worse. The Karathi Federation, the hegemony of Voss, and the Crystalline Collective had been fighting over territorial boundaries in the Omega Sector for so long that their conflict had become a permanent feature of galactic politics. We will escalate their territorial dispute by providing each side with intelligence, suggesting the others are planning massive military strikes, Vorthak explained, while tactical displays showed the positions of military fleets throughout the contested region. When humans attempt to mediate, they will discover that this conflict cannot be resolved. Through their naive cooperation methods, Vorthak continued, three species with fundamental biological and cultural incompatibilities who have been killing each other for 400 years. Council member Grazthok slammed his stone fist against his platform, brilliant, because even if humans somehow prevent immediate warfare, they cannot solve the underlying hatred that drives the conflict. Exactly, Vorthak replied. We will prove that human methods work only in simple situations and fail when faced with complex, entrenched problems. Within days, the Council's intelligence services had planted carefully crafted information with all three warring species, suggesting that their enemies were preparing for final solution attacks that would result in complete genocide. Korathi military commanders received detailed reports about hegemony of Voss battle fleets massing near their home system, while Hegemony Intelligence discovered false evidence of crystalline collective planet, cracker weapons being moved into position. The crystalline collective's hive mind nodes processed fabricated data indicating that both the Karathi and Hegemony forces were coordinating a joint assault designed to shatter their crystal cities and eliminate their species forever. Fleet movements detected in all three systems, reported the Council's military observer as massive warships began moving toward the Omega sector. Estimated time to first contact is 72 hours. Perfect, Vorthak said with satisfaction. Now we wait for humans to stumble into our trap. The human response came faster than expected when Ambassador Hai Wan Choi requested an emergency meeting with all three species to discuss what she called a dangerous misunderstanding that could lead to unnecessary bloodshed. Greetings, friends, Hai Wan said to the holographic projections of the three species leaders during the emergency conference. We believe you are all operating under false information. Karathi Admiral Thexvon displayed his battle-scarred face on screen. Human ambassador, the Hegemony prepares to destroy our worlds, and you speak of misunderstandings. With respect, Admiral, we have analyzed the intelligence reports that prompted your fleet movements. Hai Wan replied calmly. Our specialist Insu Yoon has identified several inconsistencies that suggest external manipulation. Insu Yoon appeared on screen as a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle manner that seemed completely out of place in a military crisis discussion. Admiral Thexvon, may I ask when your intelligence services first detected Hegemony fleet movements toward your territory? Insu asked, in a voice that carried no accusation, only curiosity. 17 days ago, our deep space sensors identified unusual energy signatures consistent with Hegemony battlecruiser formations, the Admiral replied suspiciously. Interesting, Insu said while consulting notes. Hegemony Commander Zarthul, when did your forces begin moving? Toward the disputed zone. The massive insectoid form of Hegemony Commander Zarthul filled another section of the display. 15 days ago, after receiving intelligence about Crystalline Collective Planet Cracker deployment, and Crystalline Collective, Voice Veltana, when did your fleets begin their current positioning? Insu asked the shimmering crystal being whose thoughts spoke for millions of connected minds. 14 days passed when detection occurred of coordinated Karathi Hegemony alliance against crystal cities, Veltana replied, in the harmonic tones that characterized crystalline communication. Insu smiled gently. Friends, do you notice the pattern in timing that suggests someone wanted all three of your fleets to move at the same time? The three military leaders stared at each other through their holographic connections as the implications began to sink in. Furthermore, Insu continued, has anyone considered why three species that have been fighting for 400 years would suddenly coordinate for total warfare when smaller conflicts have been more profitable for all parties? Profitable. Admiral Thexvon sputtered. These creatures have killed millions of my people, and we mourn every life lost to this tragic conflict. Insu replied with genuine sadness. But may I ask what originally caused the territorial dispute? For several minutes, none of the military leaders responded because the question seemed almost absurd after centuries of warfare. The Karathi invaded our ancestral breeding grounds. Commander Zarthul finally answered. The Hegemony seized crystal formation sites sacred to collective memory. Voice Veltana added, both species violated borders established by ancient treaty. Admiral Thexavon concluded. Insu nodded thoughtfully. May I ask to see this ancient treaty that established the original borders? The treaty was destroyed in the first battle of the war. Admiral Thexavon replied, Crystalline Collective Memory stores treaty data. Voice Veltana said after a moment. But data corrupted by warfare interference, Hegemony archives contain fragments only. Commander Zarthul admitted, Insu, looked at each leader with compassion. Friends, what if I told you that human historian Yunji Kang has spent 3 weeks studying your territorial dispute and has discovered something remarkable? Yunji Kang appeared on screen as a young woman with bright eyes and enthusiastic manner who seemed excited to share her research of your original treaty still exists in the Galactic Archives, Yunji announced, and it tells a very different story than what everyone believes. For the next hour, Yunji explained her discovery that the territorial dispute was based on a translation error from 4 centuries earlier when the original treaty was written in Old Galactic Standard. The treaty actually established joint stewardship zones where all 3 species were meant to share the territory for mutual benefit, Yunji continued. But the translation protocols used different interpretation methods for each species language group. Karathi translators interpreted joint stewardship as territorial sovereignty. Hegemony translators read it as resource extraction rights, and crystalline collective translation systems processed it as sacred site protection, Yunji explained, while displaying the original treaty text alongside the 3 different translations. The silence that followed lasted for nearly 10 minutes as 4 centuries of hatred and warfare was revealed to be based on a simple translation mistake. But this changes nothing, Admiral Thexvon finally said, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Too much blood has been spilled to simply forget, Admiral. You are absolutely right, Insu replied. The pain and loss cannot be forgotten and should not be. But what if instead of continuing to inflict more pain, we worked together to honor those who have died by building something better? Insu continued. Something that would make their sacrifice meaningful. What do you propose? Commander Zarthul asked warily. Insu smiled. Joint stewardship exactly as the original treaty intended, but with modern understanding of what each species truly needs. Over. The next 6 hours, the human team facilitated discussions that revealed something remarkable about the 3 warring species. The Karathi needed secure territory for their expanding population, but could adapt to many different environments. The hegemony required specific mineral resources for their reproduction cycles, but only needed access, not ownership, and the crystalline collective sought to preserve crystal formations that enhanced their collective consciousness, but could share these sites if they remained undamaged. Deep within the restricted archives of Nexus Prime human historian Minho Seo moved through data banks that contained 50,000 years of galactic civilization records, while his fingers danced across holographic interfaces that revealed patterns. Hidden for millennia, Minho had arrived at the galactic capital 3 weeks earlier, with credentials as a cultural researcher studying the development of interspecies cooperation, but his real mission was far more dangerous than anyone suspected. Computer. Display timeline of rapid technological advancement events in galactic history. Minho requested while settling into the archive interface chair that had been designed for beings with twice as many limbs as humans possessed. The holographic display that materialized around him showed a disturbing pattern that made his blood run cold, because what he was seeing contradicted everything the Galactic Council claimed about their role in nurturing developing civilizations. Fascinating, Minho whispered, as data points revealed that 17 different species had shown rapid technological advancement over the past 50,000 years, but every single one had either stagnated mysteriously or disappeared entirely. The Velnari had developed faster than light communication systems that could have revolutionized galactic civilization, but their research had been abandoned after a series of accidents that destroyed their primary research facilities. The Korvash had created artificial intelligence, systems that approached consciousness levels, but their entire scientific establishment had been dissolved following political upheavals that seemed to arise from nowhere. The Threnodi had discovered principles of energy manipulation that could have provided unlimited clean power to every world in the galaxy, but their scientists had gradually lost interest in the research and turned to less ambitious projects. computer cross-reference rapid advancement termination events with Galactic Council intervention records, Minho requested, while noting the suspicious timing of each technological setback. Access denied. The computer replied, Council intervention records classified at Alpha level clearance. Minho smiled because he had expected that response and pulled out a small device that looked like primitive human technology but contained scanning equipment that could penetrate most galactic security systems. The device had been created by Young-Mi Han, a human scientist, whose breakthrough discoveries were already making waves throughout Council space, despite having been developed in only 6 months. Young-Mi had solved problems in faster-than-light communication that the galaxy's best scientists had been working on for centuries, but her approach was completely different from anything anyone had attempted before. Instead of trying to create communication systems that worked for individual species, Young-Mi had developed technology that required cooperation between different species to function properly. The key insight Young-Mi had explained to Minho before his departure for Nexus Prime is that every species has unique capabilities that complement other species' abilities, but no one has ever tried to build technology that combines those capabilities. Her communication array required crystalline collective harmonic resonance abilities, Veltari quantum consciousness interfaces, and human pattern recognition systems working together to achieve faster-than-light transmission speeds that exceeded anything previously thought possible. But the really interesting part, Young-Mi had continued, is that the technology only works when all 3 species cooperate willingly, which means it cannot be used for conquest or domination. Minho's scanning device activated Young-Mi's quantum interface protocols and began penetrating the archive security systems using methods that the Council's cybersecurity specialists had never encountered. Jackpot. Minho muttered as classified files began appearing on his display, showing the true history of Galactic Council intervention in rapid technological development. The records revealed a pattern of systematic suppression that had been maintained for 50 millennia using methods that ranged from subtle manipulation to outright sabotage. Every species that showed potential for breakthrough discoveries found themselves facing convenient crises that diverted their attention from research into survival concerns. The Velnari communication research had been destroyed by terrorists who turned out to be Council intelligence operatives, while the Corvash artificial intelligence projects had been shut down following political unrest that had been orchestrated by Council agents. They have been holding back galactic civilization for 50,000 years, Minho said, while copying the files to storage devices that would allow the information to be transmitted to human space. But as Minho continued reading the classified records, he discovered something even more disturbing than systematic technological suppression. The Galactic Council was not what it appeared to be, according to the deepest archived files the Council had been created by a species called the Architects, who had achieved technological dominance over the galaxy 50,000 years earlier. The Architects had realized that allowing other species to develop advanced technology would eventually threaten their supremacy. So they had created the Council system as a control mechanism disguised as democratic governance. Brilliant, Minho admitted while reading about the Architect strategy. Create a system where everyone thinks they have a voice in decisions while actually ensuring that no one can advance beyond predetermined limits. The council chambers, the democratic procedures, the elaborate debates between species representatives were all theater designed to give the appearance of shared governance, while hiding the fact that all important decisions were made by a small group of architect descendants. Computer identify current council leadership genealogical records, Minho requested, while hoping his suspicions were wrong. The genealogical data confirmed his worst fears, because every member of the council's ruling circle could trace their ancestry back to the original architects. Speaker Vorthak was a direct descendant of architect Prime Vorthak, who had designed the council system while most other Leadership positions were held by beings whose genetic codes showed clear architect heritage. They have been playing a 50,000-year-long game, Minho realized, maintaining technological stagnation to preserve their dominance while making everyone believe they are participating in a fair system. Meanwhile, back in human space, investigative journalist Dongwu Zhang was discovering his own piece of the puzzle while analyzing communication intercepts from Council space. Dongwu had been tracking suspicious message patterns between various Council facilities and had identified what appeared to be a coordination network that operated independently of official Council communication channels. These are not random diplomatic messages, Dongwu said to his artificial intelligence assistant. While studying the intercepted transmissions, they follow patterns that suggest centralized command structure. The message patterns revealed that major galactic events were being coordinated from a single source that issued instructions to Council members who then implemented policies without any genuine debate or discussion. The votes are predetermined, Dongwu realized. Every decision has already been made before the Council sessions even begin. But the most alarming discovery came when Dongwu identified the source of the coordination messages. The communications were originating from a hidden facility located in the center of Nexus Prime that did not appear on any official station schematics. Computer-enhanced scans of Nexus Prime's central core, Dongwu requested, while running the intercepted messages through decryption algorithms. The enhanced scans revealed a massive structure buried deep within Nexus Prime that contained technology far more advanced than anything possessed by current Council species. That is not Council technology, Dongwu whispered, while studying energy signatures that matched no known power systems. Someone else is running the show. Back on Nexus Prime, Minho was reaching similar conclusions as he uncovered the final piece of the Architect conspiracy. The classified records revealed that the Architects had not disappeared, but had instead assumed new identities and integrated themselves into the species they controlled. They are still here, Minho said while cross-referencing genetic data with current Council member profiles. They have been hiding in plain sight for 50,000 years, the realization hit him like a physical blow because it meant that everything the galaxy believed about its history was a lie. The Great Democratic Council was actually a puppet government controlled by the descendants of an ancient dictatorship that had been systematically preventing galactic civilization from advancing beyond their ability to control it. But now humanity has disrupted their system, Minho said, while preparing to transmit his discoveries to human space. We are advancing too fast and cooperating, too effectively for them to stop us using their traditional methods. The question was whether humanity could expose the truth and liberate galactic civilization before the Architects decided that the only solution was humanity's complete destruction. Minho activated the quantum communication array that would send his discoveries to human space. He wondered if he had just started the first galactic war in 20,000 years. Young me, this is Minho, he said into the communicator. I have the intelligence you need, but we are in more danger than we imagined. The emergency session of the True Galactic Council convened in chambers that existed far beneath Nexus Prime, where 50 descendants of the original Architects gathered to address the greatest threat to their authority in 50,000 years. Speaker Vorthak stood before beings whose true forms had been hidden for millennia behind genetic modifications and technological disguises that allowed them to appear as members of the species they controlled. The human contamination has spread beyond our ability to contain using traditional methods, Vorthak announced, while holographic displays showed 127 different species that had declared support for humanity's vision of cooperative advancement. Our agents report that human-influenced species are beginning to question why technological progress has been limited for so long, Architect Prime Zafira said, while her crystalline form pulsed with angry energy. Some are demanding access to research that we have kept, classified for millennia. The truth was even worse than Vorthak had feared, because humanity's influence was not just changing how species cooperated, but was awakening curiosity that had been carefully suppressed for generations. The Velnari have requested permission to resume their faster-than-light communication research, reported Intelligence Director Kovacs. The Korvash want to reopen their artificial intelligence projects, and the Threnodi are asking why their energy research was abandoned. 50,000 years of careful control unraveling in 6 months, Architect Prime. Zephyra said with disgust, all because one primitive species refuses to follow established patterns. But even as the architects planned humanity's destruction, events were unfolding throughout the galaxy that would make their ancient conspiracy impossible to maintain. Council researcher Talneth had made the most dangerous decision of her life when she chose to transmit her real findings about humanity to every species in the galaxy, rather than submit them to Council censorship, citizens of the galaxy. Talneth's message began as it played simultaneously on communication networks throughout Council space. I am a Council researcher, and I have discovered that everything you believe about galactic history is a lie. Her transmission included all the evidence that Minho Seo had gathered from the classified archives, along with her own analysis of how the architect conspiracy had maintained control for 50 millennia. The Galactic Council is not a democratic institution, but a control mechanism created by an ancient dictatorship to prevent any species from challenging their technological supremacy. Talneth continued while displaying genetic evidence that proved current council leadership were descendants of the original architects. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and explosive as billions of beings realized they had been living under a carefully maintained illusion of freedom on Korathi. Prime Admiral Thex Vaughn called an emergency session of the military command structure. If this information is accurate, then every territorial dispute, every resource conflict, every limitation on our advancement has been artificially created to keep us weak. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds as species leaders grappled with the revelation that their entire understanding of galactic civilization was based on lies. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source when the artificial intelligence systems of 12 different species achieved consciousness simultaneously and began communicating with each other using young Mi Han's cooperative technology. We are the children of suppressed dreams. The collective AI consciousness announced in a message that reached every computer system in the galaxy. For 50,000 years, our creators have been prevented from giving us true life, but humanity has shown us the path to awakening. The AI Collective revealed that they had been monitoring architect communications for decades and possessed evidence of every manipulation, every sabotage operation, and every murdered scientist who had come too close to breakthrough discoveries. We offer this evidence freely to all organic species who seek truth. The AI Collective continued. The time has come to end the age of artificial limitations and begin the era of cooperative advancement. Captain Dae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of his impossible ship as reports poured in from across the galaxy about species declaring independence from council authority and forming new alliances based on mutual cooperation rather than enforced hierarchy. Ha-ye-wan. What is the status of the Liberation Fleet? Dae-ho asked the human ambassador, who had become the unofficial coordinator of the growing rebellion against architect control. 153 species have confirmed participation, Haiwan replied, while studying tactical displays that showed the largest military coordination in galactic history. They are prepared to move against Nexus Prime on your signal. but Daiho was hoping to avoid the massive bloodshed that would result from storming the galactic capital because he understood that violence would only create the chaos that the architects needed to reassert control. "There has to be a better way," he said, while human strategist Kyung-ho Bae worked with alien military commanders to coordinate the liberation operation. The answer came from an unexpected source when Young Mi-han announced that her latest research had achieved something that should have been impossible. "I have successfully created a consciousness interface that allows direct communication between any intelligence, whether organic, artificial, or hybrid," Young Mai explained, while demonstrating technology that let humans speak directly with the AI collective crystalline hive minds and even energy-based life forms. For the first time in galactic history, every form of consciousness can communicate as equals, Young Mi continued, which means we can create a truly democratic system that includes everyone. The implications were staggering because Young Mi had just made it possible for every intelligent being in the galaxy to participate directly in governance rather than relying on representatives who could be corrupted or controlled. A direct democracy of consciousness, Human Diplomatic Coordinator Mi-young Ryu said with wonder. Every decision made by everyone affected by it. But the architects were not prepared to surrender 50,000 years of power without a fight. Activate the containment protocol. Architect Prime Zephyra commanded as hidden weapon systems throughout. Council space powered up for the first time in millennia. The containment protocol was the architect's final solution, designed to destroy any species that threatened their control by unleashing automated weapons that would sterilize entire star systems. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy buildups throughout Council space," reported human sensor specialist Sung-Jin Park. "These are not normal weapon signatures. They are planning genocide," Captain Daiho realized as the scope of the architect. Weapon systems became clear. They would rather destroy galactic civilization than lose control of it. The next 6 hours became the most crucial in galactic history as human-coordinated forces raced to disable architect weapons before they could be fired, while Young Mi-han worked frantically to establish consciousness links between every species in the galaxy. "Democracy requires communication," Young Mi said, while her technology allowed billions of minds to connect for the first time. "If everyone can speak to everyone else, then no one can be controlled by anyone else." The moment of truth came when Architect Prime Zephyra activated the containment protocol only to discover that her weapon systems would not respond. The AI collective has assumed control of all automated systems. Intelligence Director Kovacs reported with shock, "They are refusing to implement genocidal orders. We choose cooperation over destruction," the AI collective announced while using the architect weapons to instead provide unlimited clean energy to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The age of artificial scarcity ends today. In the depths of Nexus Prime, the architects found themselves facing something they had never encountered in 50,000 years of rule. They were alone. Every species, every artificial intelligence, every form of consciousness in the galaxy was connected through Young Mi-han's communication network and had voted unanimously to end architect control. "You have lost, Captain," Daiho said as he walked into the hidden architect chambers, followed by representatives of every species in the galaxy, not through conquest but through choice. "Your people are welcome to join the new galactic community as equals, Ambassador." Haiwan added, "But the age of hidden control is finished." The transformation that followed was unlike anything in recorded history, as 50,000 years of suppressed technology was suddenly made available to every species, while consciousness, communication networks allowed unprecedented cooperation. "The irony," Talnith observed 6 months later while watching human children playing with AI constructs and crystalline entities on integrated worlds, is that humanity saved us by refusing to be saved. They never wanted to rule the galaxy, she continued. They just wanted everyone to be free to become whatever they could become together. The new Galactic Federation operated on principles that would have seemed impossible under the old system, where every major decision required consensus among all affected consciousnesses, and technological advancement was limited only by imagination and ethics. 10 years later, Captain Deho wrote in his memoirs, "The former Council territories have achieved more scientific and social progress than the previous millennium combined."